Okay. Good afternoon to everybody and welcome. Nice to be back here on Thursday lunchtime. May just make the shir a little bit shorter than usual today, with your permission. I suppose I'll do it even if I don't have your permission, but that's just a way of saying, okay, me being nice. Okay, we're into a very important Shabbos and weekend. Let's let somebody else in here. There we go. Okay. We're into a very important Shabbos and weekend. We once again, this coming Shabbos, have a double parsha. We read the last two parshiot, the last two portions of the book of Vayikra. We come to the end of the book of Leviticus. And so next week, we begin the book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers. The book of Numbers, the book of Bamidbar, is always started, you can always bank on it. It is always started, it is always read on the Shabbos before Shavuot. There are certain structural important features of the way that the calendar functions. One of the, and lining up with the parshas, one of them is that the parsha of, somebody else joining, that the parsha of Bamidbar is always read on the Shabbos before Shavuot, which means that the parsha of Bechukotai, the second parsha, Bechukosai, the second parsha that we're going to read on Shabbos, is always read 2 weeks before Shavuot. Now you may say, okay, well, what about the other? No, Bahar Bechukosai is not always together. So these two parshas are not always together. Sometimes they're separate, but Bechukosai, Bechukotai is always on the Shabbos preceding the parsha of Bamidbar, which is always preceding Shavuot. Now, why that's important is because we have a major feature of the parsha Bechukosai is what they call the Toichacha. The Toichacha being the admonitions, or if we talk about it in the usual language, a list of curses. There are curses that are mentioned in this parsha, and there are curses that are mentioned right towards the end of the Torah and always read a couple of weeks before Rosh Hashanah in Parshas Ki Savoy. And there are actually double the amount of curses that we're going to read on this coming Shabbos. Now, as we've explained before, when we take a look at these curses, so to speak, they are rather, the better word for them is admonitions. They are telling us, God forbid, what will happen if we don't obey, if we don't keep to God's rules and laws and program. And therefore, our great sages didn't want us to look at them as being curses, open-ended curses that God curses us, God forbid, but rather they are directives to help to keep us on the straight and narrow, to help to keep us on the right path. They're warnings rather than curses, and God forbid that they should ever have to be played out, that they should ever have to be carried out. Why they come now is because we're headed towards Shavuot, Zman Matan Toratenu, and this inyan, this idea of these curses, or rather of these admonitions, is that they form some kind of a cleansing. They're abrasive, they're harsh, they're difficult, and they're often compared to, by the way, like a pot scourer. You know, when you're scouring a pot, you kind of get those shivers down your spine of the steel rubbing against the steel, and you know that it is abrasive, and you know that it hurts. However, it leaves the pot clean. And this is one of the analogies that our sages have for these, in inverted commas, abrasive admonitions. Now, there's a nice mouthful for you to repeat at the Shabbos table. They're abrasive admonitions, and in their admonishing status, they may feel to be abrasive. However, at the same time, they're cleansers, they're cleansing. So it's never lined up. It's an interesting thing that's pointed out many times. It's never lined up just before Shavuot or just before Rosh Hashanah. There's always a padding. There's always something interceding in between. So you have the harsh, abrasive admonition, and then you have a cushion of next week's Parsha, and then Shavuot. And the same thing before Rosh Hashanah. Parshas Kisovei is never just before Rosh Hashanah. There's always an interceding Parsha. So you have the abrasive admonition, you have the scrubbing down of the pot scourer, but then you have the smoothing over that happens from the other Parsha. So we understand it all as being a preparation for Shavuot. And of course, in the later one, for Rosh Hashanah. What we've been busy with over the last number of weeks, however, has been a different kind of preparation. And we talk about the Sfirat HaOmer. The counting of the Omer was also, if we think about that word, Sfira, while we usually, ordinarily translate the word as being lispor, which means to count, that it's the counting of the Omer. It is also from the word sapir, which means sapphire. And from here we talk about the idea of the polishing of the sapphires, the polishing of the diamonds, the polishing of our souls in a preparation, again, for Shavuot, for the Zman Matan Toratenu, for the receiving of the Torah. By the way, next week, Wednesday, is already Rosh Chodesh. So next Tuesday night and Wednesday is Rosh Chodesh Sivan, where we go into the month of Sivan, the third month, the month in which the Torah was given to us on Mount Sinai. And so we're already getting close. We're within touching distance of Shavuot and the time of the giving of the Torah and so on. I'm sure you can already taste the taste of cheesecakes and cheese blintzes in the back of your throat. It's just around the corner until we will be able to have those delectable delights and be involved in Shavuot and receive the Torah again anew. So going through the Sfirat HaOmer is again not abrasive as much as it is looking at, focusing on, fixing up, rectifying, and looking at each detail of our neshama, and bearing in mind that each detail of our neshama, of our soul, is connected to a detail in God, in the Almighty. That's what the Sfirot are. The Sfirot that we talk about are really the attributes of God that he put in a microcosm into a soul, and the attributes, therefore, of our neshamas. That's what they are. And we know that when they're broken up, there are 49 of them, because it's 7, each one divided into 7. And that's how we have this incredible structure of the various attributes that we are supposed to focus on and concentrate on and fix and polish, and to have it all prepared and ready for the giving of the Torah on Shavuot. But there has to be an influence that comes from other details in the Parsha. You know, sometimes when there's a Parsha, like Parshas B'chukosai, we kind of write it off in a way where we say admonitions, it's the curses. But the curses is only a part of it. Yes, it's a significant part. Yes, it plays a big role. But what about the rest of the Parsha? There are so many other things that are in this Parsha, in this Sedra, in this portion, that perhaps it warrants mention from time to time as well, that there are other details. And one of those details that I'd like to share with you today is a very, very strange detail, which you will come across if you read through the Parsha on Shabbos, a very strange detail, which has to do with valuations. Now, the first thing that we've got to do when we think about values or valuations, and I don't want to use, I dafka use the word valuation, not values, because values, you know, you can say we have certain principled values. We're talking about values in terms of valuations in this segment. And just to point out something really, really interesting and something really fascinating about this concept of valuations. Now, you and I know that if you take something to be valued by a sworn valuer, there are certain factors that are taken into account, whatever that item may be. So let's say, for example, let's go to our sapphires. Let's say you're taking a precious stone and you're taking it to be valued. Now, excuse me, you will take something to be valued, and I hope that anybody who's been through this will understand and bear me out and know what I'm talking about. And even if you haven't been through it, that you'll know what I'm talking about, because it's pretty obvious. When you take something to be valued, there are certain values, certain different values that will be given by different people in the chain. For instance, if you've got a piece of jewelry, for instance, that you are insuring, the insurance valuer is going to value it in a way whereby you can replace that item. Right? That's what you hope that they value it at. It always comes out somehow when it comes to insurance. No matter what happens, it always comes out that they always tell you the same thing. You're underinsured. We know that. It's probably part of the game. Not talking about any particular insurance per se, but that's probably part of the game. You're always underinsured. But let's say you have a diamond. I don't know if diamonds can sell for, but we'll use a round number of 1,000 rand. Let's say you have a diamond that they say is worth 1,000 rand. You hope that when you go to the market and you've got to buy another diamond, if that's what you want to do, of the same size and status, that it will come out to that you'll be covered. That if, God forbid, it's stolen or it's lost or whatever, that you can cover it with that 1,000 rand. However, there is a different kind of valuation, and that's what would happen if you wanted to sell it. Now, let's maybe not use a diamond. Let's talk about a motor car. If you've got a motor car that you've insured, and God forbid the car is in an accident, and it's no fault of your own, so somebody drives into the back of your car and writes off your car, and now you've got to replace it. You'll always be underinsured, and you can never, well, it seems that you'll never be able to replace it, but you hope that you can replace it, that you can buy another car, because otherwise what's the point of the insurance? But they will also use a different kind of calculation if you were selling it. If you now went and wanted to sell your car, you probably would not get what they say on the insurance policy, because they're not looking at replacement value. The other person is looking at a bargain, and usually if you're selling it to a dealer, he's going to give you a lot less than like the man in the street. Why? Because the man in the street would have to buy from a dealer who's still going to make a markup. You with me? In other words, there are several different values to a certain item. Your motor car to you is worth X. To a dealer, it's worth X minus the 30, 40, 50% markup that he has to make, right? So that's a different value. And to the person who wants to buy it, there's another value. There's a different value, right? Agreed. There are several different values that we can place on a certain item. Now, becomes very strange, and why I'm telling you all of this is because it becomes very strange when we take a look in the Parsha of the week, and we take a look at something that they call erchin. Erchin is values, and they talk about values of dedication to the temple. If you're going to look at it, it's towards the end of Parshas Bechukosai. It is talking about chapter 27, in fact. And it says, God spoke to Moshe saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them. Now, here's a peculiar thing that we won't readily understand. I'll try and explain it. If an adult makes a vow, pledging the value of an adult or a child's life to God's sanctuary, then the pledge must be given according to the following fixed amounts. Now, what's going on here? A person makes a vow, you make a pledge. So now, don't ask me why. a person would make a pledge like this. Let's just take it that a person made a pledge like this. Right, so a person says, I'm promising that I will give the value of a person to the temple. I'd say again, don't ask me why a person would say this. I'm not giving the value of a diamond. I'm not giving you the value of a car. I'm not giving you the value of my house. I am giving you the value of a person. And then, or he would say, I'm going to give you the value of a child. The value, the monetary value of a child, the monetary value of a person. Torah then goes on and says, there are fixed amounts. If the person, it says, is between the ages of 20 and 60. Now, please don't be upset about what you're going to hear here, because I know that one or two of us, self-included, are over the age of 60, and therefore we don't seemingly carry such a great value. It says between the ages of 20 and 60, the amount will be 50 silver shekels, according to the shekel measurement system, which is used for a sanctified item. So 50 shekels between 20 and 60. Between the ages of 5 years and 20, so a youngster, the amount will be 20 shekels. It's less than half for a person under the age of 20. Between 1 month and 5 years old, the amount will be 5 shekels. 1 month and 5 years old, 5 shekels. For 60 years and older, the amount will be 15 shekels rather than all of the above. Okay, so it's like a very, very strange chart. You've got here the values of people. What is a person worth? And a person is worth, according to Torah, between 20 and 60, 50 shekels. Between 5 years old and 20 years old, 20 shekels. Between 1 month old and 5 years old, 5 shekels. And over 60, 15 shekels. So listen, we're not the worst off in the world if we're over 60. According to this chart, you're worth a lot less if you're a bit too young, if you're under the age of 5. But otherwise, we rank a close second, and it's not that pleasant to hear, but that's what the Torah says. Yes, we might be able to get vaccinated first, but you're only worth 15 shekels according to the Torah. Right? Now, what are we talking about here, and why is this here at all, and what is so fascinating about it? So first of all, as I said before, I'm not going to explain to you or try to explain why a person would have used this in the first place. But I think what Torah is going out of its way to tell us is that there were certain values that were placed on people in temple times. What was the value of a person? And the fascinating thing, I think, that I would like to bring to your attention or bring your minds to is that the values were based on age. Now pause for a moment and think about that. It means that the greatest scholar is worth, if they're of the same age, is worth the same as the biggest ignoramus. The most capable person in the business world of a certain age is worth exactly the same as a guy who might be sweeping the streets. It makes no difference what your station is. It makes no difference which family you come from. It makes no difference how much you've learned. Or, let's be spiritual. How many mitzvahs you've done. How much Torah you have. When it comes to valuations of people in terms of the Beit HaMikdash, in terms of the temple, in age brackets, everybody's the same. Now, I want to share a beautiful story with you. The beautiful story is told of a famous chassid by the name of Reb Hillel Paritcher. Reb Hillel of Paritch. Reb Hillel of Paritch lived from about 1795 to about 1864. That was his age. Reb Hillel of Paritch was known for being an absolute follower, a chassid of Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi, the Alter Rebbe. There was only one difference, or one problem, or one issue that Reb Hillel of Paritch had, and that was he had actually never met the Rebbe. He'd never met his Rebbe. Now, it wasn't COVID times, and it wasn't that he couldn't travel and couldn't get into Israel or the United States or wherever it was that his Rebbe was. Here his Rebbe was in Russia. He had or Lithuania for a while in Liadi. He'd never met him. He'd never seen him. And yet he was a great, ardent follower, a chassid of the Alter Rebbe. Now, the reason that it's remarkable that Reb Hillel of Paritch had never met the Alter Rebbe, his Rebbe, why it's remarkable is because he told the story many times, and many stories were told of just how hard he tried to get to see the Rebbe. He tried hard, but no matter what he did, he never got to see him. So he would take off and he would go on a journey to try and spend Yom Tov with his Rebbe. You think about, there's a beautiful story that's told about a chassid. This is a story within a story, okay? The story within the story is of a chassid who one day decided that he was going to go to see the Rebbe, but the problem was he hadn't spoken to his wife about it at all. And what happened was he went out one day to buy milk from the store. She sent him to buy milk, and he's carrying the bottles of milk and walking home, and a wagon comes past him with a bunch of Hasidim who are on their way to the Rebbe. They're on their way to wherever it was, to Lubavitch or Tzanz or Belz, wherever it was that they were on their way. It was a few days before a big Chag, before, let's say, Rosh Hashanah, and they wanted to go and spend Rosh Hashanah with the Rebbe. So they say to this Chassid, Rebbe Yid, come join us. We're on our way to see the Rebbe. He says, no. I'm on my way. I can't go now. I would love to join you, but I'll have to do it at a later stage or whatever. I'm on my way home, and he shows them he's carrying the 3 bottles of milk that his wife sent him to buy from the store. And they said to him, come on, get on the wagon, come on. And they sang L'chaim, and they're singing songs, and they're on this wagon on their way to see the Rebbe. And eventually they persuade him, and he gets on the wagon, and off he goes. Now remember, he has no cell phone. He has no ways of contacting his wife, and he forgets about it. He's swept up by this incredible, enthusiastic group, and they sing all the way to the town that they're going to spend Yom Tov with the Rebbe. And he spends Rosh Hashanah there. And then they stay for Yom Kippur. And then they stay for Sukkot. And it suddenly dawns on him, he's in the middle of dancing on Simchas Torah. He's been gone for 3 weeks. It suddenly dawns on him that he didn't tell his wife that he was coming to the Rebbe. He's been gone now for 3.5 weeks. He went off to buy milk, and he hasn't returned. It's now 3.5 weeks later. And he gets into a panic, and he can't wait. He makes Havdalah straight after Yom Tov, and he rushes out, and he gets the first ride that he can back to his hometown. It's a journey of an overnight trip to get home, and he's still carrying the basket with the 3 bottles of milk. Anyway, to cut a long story short, he arrives home, and he rushes into the house. Now he's in a hurry, right? He rushes into the house, and he trips on the front doorstep, and he goes flying into the living quarters, and the 3 bottles of milk go flying, and they smash, right? So now his wife is standing there ready with the rolling pin, and she says to him, he looks up at her, and he says to her, what's the moral of the story? So you might think that the moral of the story should be no use crying over spilt milk, right? No, you're wrong. He says, the moral of the story here is you should never rush. He says, you should never rush. I was in such a rush to get home that I tripped on the doorstep, right? So now let's go back to Reb Hillel Paritch. Reb Hillel Paritch was so keen to get to see his Rebbe that he made elaborate plans to travel to the Rebbe for a Yom Tov. There was a storm and he never got there. The horse died on the way. I don't know. One thing after the other. He never ever got to see the Rebbe. He once made the following plan. He knew that his Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, was going to be visiting a certain place. And it wasn't far away from where he was. He knew that the Rebbe was coming there. The Rebbe was traveling around. He used to do collections. He used to go around from town to town and also to check up on his Hasidim wherever they were. And he knew that his Rebbe was coming to a certain place. And he decided that in order to undo this terrible decree that seemed to be against him, seeing the Rebbe, that he was going to get there before the Rebbe arrived. And instead of trying to get to where the Rebbe was, he would be waiting to greet the Rebbe when the Rebbe came. Now, he arrives in this town, and he finds out exactly where the Rebbe is going to be staying. So the Rebbe had booked a place in a Lahavdil, a B&B. You know, he was going to be staying in a bed and breakfast place somewhere in this town by some Yidden or whatever. He got into that place and he hid under the bed. Rabbi Hillel Paritcher, this great tzaddik, chacham, chassid, hid under the bed that the Alter Rebbe was going to use in the little room in this overnight malon, this inn that the Rebbe had taken a room in. He hides under the bed. Sure enough, the Alter Rebbe came to town. He's hiding under the bed. The Alter Rebbe comes to the room. He walks into the room. And Rabbi Hillel Paritcher had made up his mind that he wasn't just going to see his Rebbe. He'd prepared. He had taken very, very careful precautions to prepare correctly. And one of the things that he knew about his Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, was that the Alter Rebbe was a great, great halachic expert. He wrote a Shulchan Aruch called the Shulchan Aruch Harav, it's known as, or the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. He had written this Shulchan Aruch, a code of Jewish law. He was a highly respected halachic expert of the era. And so he had prepared a halachic question that he wanted to ask the Rebbe. And the question, we're told, or he told afterwards, was about this point in Jewish law. He had a problem with understanding the laws of valuations. Why should someone who is simple be valued the same as someone who is very learned when it comes to, and then it's just lumped together according to age? Why should someone who is of royal stock be valued the same as someone who's a peasant when it comes to these things just lumped together because of age? And he had this deep halachic question that he wanted to pose to the Alter Rebbe. He's lying under the bed, the door opens, and in walks the Rebbe into the room. The only thing that Rabbi Hillel Paritcher remembered about this incident was he said, the Rebbe walked into the room, and he was completely invisible under the bed. And the Rebbe said, if a young man has a question in Erichin, if a young man comes with a question in valuations, darf erst meirig sein sich allein. He should first look very carefully at his own value. He got such a fright that he passed out. And when he came to, the Alter Rebbe had left. And he never got to see his Rebbe anyway. But he had the most profound and the most important lesson that the Rebbe had taught him without even seeing him. What did the Rebbe teach him? What the Rebbe was teaching him, we're told, is something that is of fundamental importance, and it also makes sense as to why this comes at the end of the book of Vayikra. The book of Vayikra, the book of Leviticus, is all about everything that we had to do in the service of Hashem in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple. The offerings, the sacrifices, the sin offerings, the gift offerings, the Yom Kippur offerings, all of them are mentioned. We've been through them all now in the book of Vayikra. This is about our service of God. You know, people often talk about a service in shul. A service in shul is our davening, which replaces the service that we did in the Beit HaMikdash. And that service was bringing these offerings, bringing these korbanot, going through the processes of our interaction with God Almighty, pleasing Him, putting it on the altar, offering it up, doing all of those things. That's what the book of Vayikra is all about. Now, right towards the end, we're talking about a fundamental issue about the value of the person bringing the offering, so to speak, or the value of an individual. And here God Almighty is telling us everyone is equal. Yes, there are the age differences. We're not going to go there at the moment. But everyone in a certain age is equal. The fact that you've learned a lot doesn't make you better or more valuable in terms of the Beit HaMikdash, in terms of the temple. You're not more valuable than someone who hasn't. If you're very wealthy, it doesn't make you more valuable in terms of the Beit HaMikdash, in terms of the temple, than someone who's totally impecunious. If you have the greatest acumen of knowledge of business or medicine or plumbing for that matter, it doesn't make you any different, any better than the one who's just starting out, who knows absolutely nothing and who hasn't learned Aleph Beis yet. Because according to Torah, yes, age differences. We're not going to go there, as I said, but according to Torah, everybody is equal. Everybody has the same value. When it comes to God, when it comes to the Beit HaMikdash, everybody counts equally. And what was he telling Reb Hillel Paritcher? He was telling him, if you can't see that somebody else is as valuable as you are, you've got a problem. If you can't see that you can learn from others and that everybody has something to teach you, you've got a problem. It's not that they've got a problem, you've got a problem. And therefore, if you are battling with this idea of the fact that people can be the same value as you are, you've got to first go back and check into the deep annals of your soul, of your heart, and check, because maybe you've got the wrong value placed on yourself. You yourself think of yourself as being greater than they are, better than they are, superior to others, more valuable than somebody else. Says Torah, this is the leveler. And here at the end of the book of Vayikra, not only are we scouring the pots and getting used to the idea of how abrasive it can be, and the idea of cleaning up our act, but in addition to that, and probably more important than that, is to remember that each and every one of us counts. Everybody, this is the leveler that's telling us we are all equal. When it comes to Mount Sinai in a week and a bit from now, when it comes to Zman Matan Toratenu, the time of the giving of the Torah, everybody had to be there equally. If there was one person missing, God wouldn't have given us the Torah. Everybody needed to be part of it, and everybody part of it equally. And the fact that we may think that, you know what, the mitzvahs that I do are not nearly as valuable as the mitzvahs of a person who's greater than me, not nearly as valuable as this Talmid Chacham or this tzaddik. The fact is that we all have equal access to God and to godliness. We all have equal access to the Almighty. We all have equal access to the Beit HaMikdash, and ultimately we're all of the same value. Again, forgive the idea of the different age groups, but let's talk about us all being in the same age group. In the same age group, we all have exactly the same value and the same worth. So hopefully we can get our values or valuations correct, remembering the importance of ourselves and at the same time remembering the importance of others. And it's only really, if you think about it, so the psychologists will tell you, if you place no value on yourself, you actually can't value other people. You've got to remember that you've got an important role to play. You've got something very valuable and unique and an unbelievable personal mission that you have in this world, as do I, as does the next person. But remember that in the same way as yours is important, so is their great value and importance in the life and in the ways and the means of the other. And therefore, this idea of recognizing that the Beit HaMikdash, that God is not going to look at how much you've learned or how much you know, or what your business acumen is, or what your monetary value is. God is going to look simply, or Torah looks at, or the Beit HaMikdash looks at simply, if you're of a certain age, in a certain bracket, all valued exactly the same. That's not a negative, it's a positive. And the positive is we all have a vital, vital role to play. And when I recognize my vital role, hopefully I can recognize yours. And when you recognize yours, hopefully you can recognize mine. So let's value ourselves properly and carefully and make sure that we fully understand how important it is in our lives going forward. I hope you have a great rest of this week. Beautiful Shabbos. Remember, it's Shabbos Mevorachim, Shabbos on which we bless the new month beginning, as we said, on Wednesday with the month of Sivan coming in. Remember that Shavuot is a week from Sunday night, Monday and Tuesday, and we look forward to a beautiful Chag, but we'll talk a little bit about Shavuot next week. Apologies for cutting it a little bit short today, but look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care and have a good week.
Thank you.
Thank you and good Shabbos.
Take care, everybody.